Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the bevels into our stabilizer and our rudder here. To establish this crack, I'm simply going to fold this over. Now normally we put our bevel cut on the side of the elevator, but in this case, because that area is so thin, we don't want to compromise it at all, and we don't want to put any weighted popsicle skewers like we've done in the past. So we're going to actually cut our bevel cut on the opposite side. And there's two different ways we can do this. The one is with the razor blade. Now if you're going to do it with the razor blade first, make sure that your hands are clear from the hinge line and clear from the razor blade as you pull it through. And also, don't hold your razor blade perpendicular to your foam. Hold it in a nice gradual angle and make sure your razor blade's nice and sharp. Now if you notice, I'm focusing on keeping this razor blade just shy on the other side of the hinge line. You don't want to be cutting through your hinge line and onto the other side of the foam. Once you go ahead and do that, your finger is a guide. And we're simply going to pull nice and steady. Straight towards us. Now at this point, if your foam doesn't cut all the way down to that hinge line, you can go back over and over again until you get it just perfect. If you cut through it, don't worry. All you simply need to do is put a little piece of tape on there and it's good as new. Now, that's one method. The other method is simply to take a sanding block, and this is for all you that don't like to handle razor blades close to your fingers, which sometimes I don't. Hold it off the edge of the table. And with a few swipes, you get the exact same result, just a little bit more messy. For this one, we're going to put our bevel cut on the side of the rudder. This is your fin, and this is your rudder. We're going to fold 90 degrees. This time, go ahead and use the table as your friend. To do that, simply hold this down. This is really good for pieces that are too small to hold with your hand. Once again, if you have to go over it to make it right, you don't want this portion to be bound because the small servos we use don't like it. Now at this point, this does work just fine as a control surface, but over time and over crashes, it's going to go ahead and start delaminating. So one thing we can do to fix that problem is simply by putting a bead of hot glue down the middle and scraping off the excess. Now I want to stress that you want to get as much hot glue off after you put it on as possible. All this is simply going to do is fuse the paper, the foam, and the hinge all together so it makes a nice durable joint. We're going to put a thin ribbon of glue right down the center. It doesn't have to be a lot because we're going to be scraping a lot off. Now take your scrap piece of foam and scrape as much off as you can. Careful not to break your foam or get too aggressive with it. Take off as much as you can like you're brushing and thinning out paint. Now don't close this joint, let it thoroughly dry while it's open. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the rudder. Nozzle right down against the center paper there. Really thin bead, and you'll notice I'm not doing both sides at once, I'm just doing one side. If you get a little on the excess, don't worry. Scrape off as much as you can. Once these are thoroughly dry, we're going to go ahead and put it against the table. Check for movement. It's going to be a little bit stiff. Go ahead and loosen up with your hand using the table as your friend, making sure that this flows nice and free. If it's difficult, it's going to be difficult for the servos as well. At this point, we're going to go ahead and remove these extra little blocks of foam. If you're scratch building this, these probably don't exist at all at this moment. Pop those out. I like to fold this bottom piece back a little bit and slide it in. Make sure you're happy with the fit, and always keep that little gauge ready to make sure you can check for making sure it's perpendicular. The more times you check this, the better your plan's going to be built. Once you're happy with the fit, let's go ahead and apply a little bit of glue and glue it in. We can go back later and reinforce this. This is mostly just to tack it. But if you notice here, I'm putting this glue here so it smears away from the hinge line and goes to where we want it to go. A little hot there. I'm going to go ahead and just hold this there until it thoroughly dries. At this point, we're ready to test fit the fuselage and the tail surfaces together. It's always good to do a test fit before gluing, just to make sure you're used to the motion and that you have no fit issues. For this, I'm simply going to slide the keel of the rudder through the fuselage, and I'm going to pull it up until the tabs line up in the fuselage. Do one tab at a time. Once that's put together, go ahead and use our little tool. Check and make sure it's perpendicular. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue on both these portions here. Always be strategic about what pieces you put the glue on. You don't want to drag your piece through the glue. We're going to go back afterwards and reinforce this. It's just to hold it in place and make a stronger glue joint. Slide it back. One tab in. the other tab in. Now we go for making sure it's perpendicular. Once this is dried, we're going to go ahead and open this up a little bit with our thumb, and we're going to put a little tiny drop of hot glue on both sides of the rudder. Press it down, and of course, we go back to make sure it's perpendicular. Now that everything's perpendicular and solid, we're just going to go ahead and get a little bit of reinforcement glue on both sides, and then use a scrap piece of foam to smear off the excess. Extra glue, especially by the tail, can cause nothing but problems.